last few weeks, you may have noticed that I haven't been uploading tutorials, and this is because I've been working on loads of cake decorating videos and ideas behind the scenes. Now, I'm so excited to be back and I'll be sharing a new video tutorial with you this week. So I'm going to be showing you how to create this really sweet makeup bag with all this edible makeup around the front of the cake. Okay, let's get started. So in order to make the makeup bag, I've actually got 3 separate cakes. Now, I baked an 8-inch square cake and I just trimmed the sides down, so I ended up with a cake that was 7 inches by 7 inches. Now, I've cut this into 3 separate cakes. The first one is 7 inches by 3 inches. The next one is 7 inches by 2.5 inches. And the third one is 7 inches by 1.5 inches. So I'm going to start to stack my cake. I'm going to be using some milk chocolate ganache as the filling. Now, I will put a link to my chocolate ganache recipe in the description below. And just take my next layer and just glue that into place. Now, I'm adding my ganache between my layers before I carve my cake, just to give it a little bit more stability, as it will be a lot thinner at the top. So I'm gonna have a zip at the top of my cake. So I want this to be around 1 centimeter wide. So I'm just gonna pop in 2 marks just to give me a guide. I then want to taper down my cake on the longer side from that mark to the edge of the cake at the bottom. And at the bottom, I'm just going to tuck it in slightly, just so we get a slight curve on the bottom of our makeup bag. I want to do exactly the same thing on the other side. Now, I have had my cakes in the fridge for a few hours, so they're slightly firm, which will make it a lot easier for me to cut. So as you can see, the cake is a lot thinner at the top and slightly wider at the bottom. I then just want to curve the sides slightly. So I'm just curving them round on the end. Again, just tucking in at the bottom and just getting rid of that sharp corner. And I'm going to do exactly the same to the other side. You just want to work on it so that both sides of your makeup bag match. Once you're happy with the shape, I'm then going to go in and cover the whole thing in a layer of chocolate ganache. So first of all, I'm just starting on the front and those sides. Now, because my cake is slightly curved, I'm going to go in with a flexi smoother just to help me smooth down that ganache. So you can see I can just bend that smoother around and just run it up those sides, and then work on the other side. So this first coating of ganache is just acting as a crumb coat. So we're just locking in any of those loose crumbs on the surface. So we're really starting to get the shape of our makeup bag. Now, once you're happy with your crumb coat, I'm going to pop my cake in the fridge just for that ganache to firm up, so that I can add another coating around the outside just to smooth out any imperfections. Now that initial crumb coat has set, I'm just going to go in again with my chocolate ganache, just smoothing it over my cake just to give me a nice base for my fondant. Now I'm happy with the shape of my cake. It's starting to resemble the shape of a makeup bag. I'm going to pop my cake in the fridge for that ganache to firm up. So now I'm going to cover it with my fondant. So for the main part of my makeup bag, I'm going to be using this lilac colour. I've then got some dark purple, which I'm going to be using for the zip, and just some white to add a little tag on the side. I'm going to start with the zip that's going to run along the top. So I'm going to start by adding on just a little bit of water that I've mixed with some icing sugar just to make a sticky glue. For the zip, I'm going to be using this mould. So this is a mould by Katie Sue, and we just have this open zip. Now, I want my zip closed, so I'm going to be using part of this and then joining 2 pieces together. To start, I'm just going to pop a small amount of corn flour into my mould so that my fondant isn't going to stick. I'm then going to take some of that dark purple fondant and just push that into my mould. Push that down with my rolling pin. Taking a craft knife, I'm going to cut along the top, just taking off any excess. I can then remove that from my mould, and we've got the start of our zip. So I'm going to do another one of these. Once I've got enough zip to run all the way down, I want to join these pieces together I'm then going to take the light purple and cover the entire cake, but before I do, I just want to finish off the end of my zip. I've cut out a very small rectangle of the light purple. I've then got this rotating wheel modelling tool, and I'm going to use this just so it looks like it's been stitched. I'm then going to go ahead and cover my whole bag in that water and icing sugar, and this is just going to allow that fondant to stick onto our ganache. Now I'm going to cover my bag in two halves, and the join is going to be along the side, so this is going to be where it looks like the bag has been stitched together. I'm actually going to create a straight line at the top, so this is going to sit against that zip. I'm just going to go in and soften that slightly. Place that straight edge just covering the top of my zip and just smooth that down, making sure that I come around the edge, just using that flexi smoother to push that fondant underneath and just using it to cut off any excess. Go in with my craft knife and just cut the excess off of those sides. I'm then going to roll out another piece of fondant so that we can cover the other side. So I've done exactly the same. I've got a piece of fondant with that straight edge. Again, along the bottom, just making sure that that fondant is pushed in, so it's going underneath. Now on the side, I want to join my two parts so I can actually see where that seam needs to be. Now I'm going to smooth those two pieces together, but then go in with my Dresden tool and just push all the way up so we get a crease. And that's going to look like it's where the bag has been stitched together. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. So just run my finger up so I can see where the piece of fondant is underneath. And as you can see, we've just got that small piece that we added first, just sitting underneath that fondant. Using that wheel modelling tool, I'm going to run just a small line of stitching along the top. Okay, so to finish off my zip, I want to have the part that you pull to open the zip. So again, just popping in some corn flour just to stop my fondant from sticking. Now, if you do find that your fondant does stick a lot, then you can add some Tylose powder into your fondant, and this will just make it slightly firmer. Before adding that on with a little bit of edible glue, with most zips, part of the zip is made of canvas and part of it is made of plastic or metal. So the center of my zip, where we've got the teeth and also the pulley part, I'm going to be using some confectioner's glaze just to make it look like it's made of plastic. So it's just going to add a little bit of shine. Okay, so the last thing I want to do for my makeup bag is add a little tag onto the side. So I've got a small amount of white fondant and I'm just going to roll this out until it's around 1 to 2 millimeters in thickness. I've then got some small little letters, and these are just from the Sweet Stamp mini message set. I'm actually just going to put the word glam, and I've just mixed together a small amount of purple food gel with some white edible art paint. Taking my letters, I'm just going to start by painting the surface with that purple. Now these are so tiny that it can be quite hard to paint inside. So just by painting the edge, I'm going to push that into my fondant and it's going to emboss the G. So I'm going to do this all of the letters. I want to make the tag look like it's been stitched. So I'm just going to go around 3 sides. I'm then going to go around the whole thing and just cut this out. So the side without the stitch marks is going to go against my cake. On the side where we've got that seam, I'm just going to go in with my Dresden tool and just open it up slightly, pop in a small amount of edible glue. I can then take that cute little tag and I'm just going to push it carefully into that gap. The next thing to do is for me to cover my board so I can move my cake across. For the board that the cake is going to sit on, I've got a 12-inch drum board, and this one just measures 1 centimetre in height. So this is going to give me enough space for my makeup bag and some makeup that we're going to create to go at the front. So I'm going to start by covering this in some white fondant. So I'm just going to roll it out until it's large enough to cover my board. I'm then going to add some water onto the surface of my board to allow that fondant to stick. I can then smooth that down and trim off any excess before adding a white ribbon around the edge, just securing this in place with some double-sided tape. So I want to carefully transfer my makeup bag onto my board. So I'm going to start just by popping down a small amount of Ganache onto the back of my board and lift up my bag. And this is going to give us plenty of room at the front to create some makeup. Now to do this, I'm going to be using some of the Saracino modelling paste. So this is just the pasta model. Now this is white, but you can also get it in coloured packs. I'm going to start by making some brushes. For these ones, I'm going to be using some black for the handle, a small amount of light grey, and also some brown for the bristles. So I'm going to start by just softening off the black and rolling this into a sausage shape. Now, so I don't get any finger marks as I roll that out, I'm going to be using my paddle smoother. So I'm just rolling over the top, and I want it slightly tapered down on one end. Now, if you will need to create a brush in exactly the same size, this is about 17 grams of black modelling paste. Now you could just leave it like this, or if you wanted to give it more stability, or maybe if you want to stand it up against your cake, I'm going to take bamboo skewer and just push that all the way down. I'm going to use my craft knife just to cut the end off. Now, I want this brush to be quite a small brush, so I've got 7 grams of the light brown and taper that down. I'm then going to push that on the end of that bamboo skewer. Now, in order to make this look like a brush, I'm going to start with a tool that has a point on the end and just go all over the end. I can then take my Dresden tool and I want to run lines all the way on the outside. I'm then going to take the grey modelling paste and roll this out until it's really thin, cutting a strip which is around 1 inch wide. I can then add a small amount of edible glue onto both the handle and those bristles and place that on. And where that grey covers those bristles, I'm just going to push in to flatten it down slightly. And using my Dresden tool, I'm just going to run a little line around the bottom. Now to finish off my brush, I'm going to take some edible tin in a black and a brown. Combine these together, and just on the tip of my brush, just add on a little bit of that tint. So there we have our first makeup brush. Now you can use this same technique to create loads of different brushes in different sizes. So I've also got a slightly larger brush. Okay, so I'm going to work on some eyeshadow palettes. So I've got some white modelling paste and some black. And I'm also going to be using some metallic luster dust. Now, these really give the appearance of eyeshadow, and they come in so many different colours. So I'm going to start by rolling out my white modelling paste until it's around 4mm in thickness. I'm then going to take a small piece of cling film or plastic wrap and place this over the top. Using a circle cutter, or this is just a large piping tip, so this just measures just over 1 inch. I'm going to cut out a circle. Now by using that cling film, I get this curve on the top. I'm then going to take some of my luster dusts. So this is the hot pink, and I'm going to add in some dipping solution or some rejuvenating spirit, and this is going to turn it into an edible paint. The great thing about using dipping solution is once it dries, it goes back to being a dust form, which looks perfect to use for eyeshadow. Now I do actually have a 15% off discount code for sweet sticks, so you can get the luster dust or their edible art paints, and I will put all the details to this in the description below. And I'm going to do the other one in a different shade. This is actually the Tiffany blue. Whilst they are drying, I'm just going to take my black modelling paste and I want to roll this out into a long strip. I'm then going to use my pizza cutter and cut out some strips. Now I want these to be the same height as those little circle discs that we've created. I'm going to make them around 5mm in thickness. So I'm just going to take one of those little circles and just add some edible glue around the edge. I can then take the strip of black and just run that around, trimming it down so that we create just a little pot. And you can make as many of these little eyeshadows as you like and make them in colours that you think the person who the cake is for would enjoy to wear. So I've got one with the hot pink, I've got one with the Tiffany blue, created another one with the rose gold, and lastly the mandarin orange. Now, I don't know about you, but one staple that is always in my makeup bag is my beauty blender. So I've got some of the fuchsia Saracino, and I'm gonna roll this into a ball, just rolling it until I've got rid of all of those marks. This is probably the easiest thing to make, so I'm just gonna taper it down in the palm of my hand, pushing on one side. So we wanna create a point at one end, so that it remains really chunky on the other side. So that's going to give us our beauty blender. Now, if you wanted to create something like a bronzer, I've got two different sizes of cookie cutters. So this one is just slightly smaller than the first one. So I'm going to start by rolling out some white, and in a very similar way to how we did the eyeshadow, place on some cling film. Now, before I cut this out, I'm actually going to take a ruler and just push a crisscross pattern into the surface. I can then use the smaller cutter. I'm then going to use a few different shades of luster dust. So I've got a dark rose, a rose gold, and also a glamorous gold. And I'm going to paint these over the top, just blending those colours together. So when those colours are still wet, we can just blend those in. So this is going to give us what will look like a really pretty bronzer. I'm then going to roll out some of that black modelling paste till it's around 2mm in thickness, and use the slightly larger cutter. I then want to roll the rest of that black into a strip, just like we had with the eyeshadow palette, and this is going to run around the edge. I can then pop down some edible glue, carefully trimming off the excess, and that's going to look like this little pot where the lid's been taken off. Lastly, I'm going to create a lipstick. So I've got a small ball of black, a small ball of grey, and also a reddy pinky colour. I'm going to start with 10 grams of black, roll this into a ball, roll that out into a sausage. So I want to round off one end, and then on the other end I want to pinch it between my finger and my thumb just to get an edge on that top. I'm then going to take the grey and I want to do the same. So I'm going to roll this into a ball and then roll this into a sausage. And I've taken around 8 grams. Now for this one, I'm actually going to chop off both ends. Now these are just sticking together on their own, but you can add a small amount of edible glue. Now I'm using the Saracino modelling paste, which is going to set quite firm. If you did want it to set a lot softer, then you can also use a fondant. And I'm going to cut out just a really thin strip, around 3mm wide. I'm going to stick this just at the bottom of that grey. And I'm going to add on a really tiny ball. And that would be what the lid would connect onto. I'm then going to take my red and roll this into sausage shape. Now we want this thinner than the grey. I'm going to trim off one end. I'm then going to trim off at an angle. And that's going to give us our lipstick. I can then work out where I want everything to go. So I've got my beauty blender, got my brushes, I've got the bronzer and some of those eyeshadows. Now I think I'm going to put the brushes on the board just so you can see the whole of the makeup bag. So once I'm happy where everything is going to go, I'm going to glue it all down with some edible glue. Now let me know in the comments below, what do you think? Is there any makeup that you would have created to add onto your makeup cake? So here we have the finished makeup bag cake with all this makeup around the front of the bag. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and will be able to use some of these elements on your own cakes. If you have enjoyed the video, please don't forget to give it a like. And if you'd like to see more videos like this and you haven't already, then don't forget you can subscribe to the Cake Spannings YouTube channel. So until next time, bye!